She blocked his driveway, questioned his identity, and called 911. All because she couldn't believe a black man could live in this neighborhood. But when the truth about her came out, everything changed. What started as a confrontation over a garage door spiraled into a shocking unraveling of secrets, lies, and karma. This isn't just about racism. It's about what happens when privilege meets reality. The sun had already dipped below the horizon by the time Marcus pulled his sleek, midnight blue sedan into the driveway of his two-story home in the affluent suburbs of Amsterdam Noord, a quiet, tree-lined district just north of the Dutch capital. The day had been a grueling marathon of client meetings, each one more demanding than the last, followed by a frantic scramble to tweak blueprints for a sustainable housing project due next week. His tie hung loose around his neck, the top button of his crisp white shirt undone, and his broad shoulders slumped slightly as he exhaled the weight of the day. Home was supposed to be his sanctuary, a hard-earned reward for years of relentless ambition as a black architect thriving in a field and a neighborhood where people like him were still a rarity. He pressed the button to lower the garage door, its mechanical hum a familiar signal that the world could finally fade away. But just as the door began its descent, a glaring set of headlights caught his eye. Squinting, he stepped back into the cool evening air and saw it. An oversized SUV, its glossy black frame sprawled carelessly across his lawn and halfway onto the sidewalk, completely blocking his driveway. Grass blades bent under its tires, and the engine idled with a low, arrogant rumble. Marcus frowned, his tired mind briefly considering the possibility of a lost delivery driver. He shut off his own engine, grabbed his leather satchel, and walked toward the vehicle, his polished loafers clicking softly against the pavement. The driver's window was rolled down, revealing a woman in her late 40s with sharp cheekbones, platinum blonde hair pulled into a tight bun, and a pair of oversized sunglasses perched on her nose despite the fading light. She was tapping away at her phone, oblivious or indifferent to his approach. "Excuse me," Marcus said, his voice calm but firm, honed by years of navigating tense boardrooms. "You're blocking my driveway. Could you move your car?" The woman, Hoa, as he'd later learn, barely glanced up from her screen. "I'm waiting for a friend," she replied, her tone clipped and dripping with entitlement. "I'll only be a minute." Marcus raised an eyebrow, his patience already thin. "A minute doesn't change the fact that this is private property. I need to get in. Please move." She finally looked at him, her eyes narrowing as they flicked over his dark skin, his tailored suit, his steady gaze. Her lips pursed into a thin line, and she set her phone down with exaggerated slowness. "Private property?" she echoed, her Dutch accent tinged with mockery. "And you're telling me this is your house?" "Yes," Marcus said, keeping his tone even. "I live here. Now, if you don't mind." "Do you, though?" Hoa cut him off, her voice rising with a mix of skepticism and disdain. She leaned out the window slightly, sizing him up as if he were a puzzle she couldn't quite solve, or didn't want to. "I've lived in this neighborhood for years, and I don't remember seeing you around." Marcus felt the familiar prickle of irritation creeping up his spine, the kind that came not from exhaustion, but from years of being questioned, doubted, or outright dismissed because of how he looked. He took a slow breath, forcing himself to stay composed. "I've been here for 2 years. Not that it's any of your business. Just move the car." Hoa scoffed, crossing her arms. "You don't get to tell me what to do. I'm on the HOA board. I know everyone who belongs here, and who doesn't." Her eyes glinted with something uglier than suspicion now, a thinly veiled hostility that Marcus had seen too many times before. Maybe I should call someone to verify who you really are. And before he could respond, she snatched her phone back up and dialed 112, the Dutch emergency line, her fingers moving with theatrical urgency. Yes, hello, she said, her voice suddenly trembling with feigned panic. There's a man here claiming he owns a house on Lindenstraat. He's acting aggressive, and I don't feel safe. I think he might be an intruder. Please send someone right away. Marcus stood there, stunned into silence for a moment, the absurdity of the situation washing over him like a cold wave. He watched as Hoa hung up, a smug smile tugging at her lips, and he realized this wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was a performance, one she'd probably rehearsed before, and he was the unwilling villain in her script. Really? He said, his voice low and incredulous. You're calling the police because I asked you to move your car? Safety first, she chirped, leaning back in her seat with the confidence of someone who'd never faced consequences. Let's see what they have to say about this. Marcus clenched his jaw, his hands tightening around the strap of his satchel. He could feel the weight of her gaze, the unspoken assumptions behind it, that he didn't belong here, that his presence was a threat, that his skin made him suspect. It wasn't new. God knows it wasn't. But it still stung, sharp and precise, right there in front of the home he'd poured his life into. The distant wail of sirens broke the silence, growing louder as red and blue lights began to flash against the manicured hedges lining the street. Marcus straightened, bracing himself for what came next. He knew the drill. Stay calm. Keep your hands visible. Explain yourself clearly. He'd done it before, too many times, and he'd do it again now. But as the police cruiser pulled up and two officers stepped out, he couldn't shake the quiet fury simmering beneath his composure. This was his home, his driveway, his life. And yet, here he was, about to defend it all over again. Two officers emerged from the cruiser, their navy uniforms crisp against the evening gloom. The taller one, a broad-shouldered man with a buzz cut and a stern expression, approached first, his hand resting casually near his holster. The second, a younger woman with sharp eyes and a notepad already in hand, followed close behind. Hoa wasted no time, flinging her car door open and stepping out with the air of a damsel in distress. "Officers, thank God you're here," she said, her voice quivering just enough to sell the act. "This man, he's been harassing me, claiming he lives here. I told him I'm just waiting for a friend, but he got aggressive. I don't feel safe." Marcus raised his hands slightly, palms out, a reflex born from years of caution. "That's not what happened," he said, his tone steady but firm. "I asked her to move her car because it's blocking my driveway. This is my house. She refused and called you instead." The male officer, his name tag read Van Dyke, glanced between them, his expression unreadable. "All right, let's sort this out. Sir, can you show us some ID?" Marcus nodded, reaching slowly into his satchel. "It's in my wallet. I'm getting it now." He pulled out his Dutch residence card and driver's license, handing them over with deliberate care. Van Dyke took them, studying the details while the female officer, de Jong, scribbled something in her notepad. Hoa crossed her arms, smirking faintly. "Anyone can carry fake ID," she muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I've never seen him at any HOA meetings. He doesn't belong here." Marcus bit back a retort, letting the officers do their job. Van Dyke handed the ID back after a moment, then turned to Hoa. "And you, ma'am? Your ID, please." Her smirk faltered. "Me? Why do you need mine? I'm the one who called you." "Standard procedure," de Jong said, her voice clipped. We need to verify everyone involved. Hoa huffed, digging through her designer purse with exaggerated reluctance. She produced a residence card and thrust it at Van Dyke, who examined it with the same scrutiny he'd given Marcus's. Hoang Nguyen, he read aloud, then handed it to de Jong, who typed something into a handheld device. All right, Van Dyke said, turning back to Marcus. You say this is your house. Can you prove it? Marcus nodded. My keys are in my bag. I can open the front door right now. He gestured toward the modern, glass-paneled entrance just steps away. Hoa opened her mouth to protest, but Van Dyke held up a hand. Go ahead, he said. Marcus walked to the door, unlocked it with a soft click, and pushed it open, revealing a glimpse of his minimalist living room. Dark hardwood floors, a sleek sectional sofa, and a framed blueprint on the wall. He stepped back, meeting Van Dyke's gaze. Satisfied? The officer nodded, but before he could speak, de Jong looked up from her device, her brow furrowing. Ma'am, she said to Hoa, can you explain why your name's flagged in our system? Hoa froze, her confident facade cracking like thin ice. Flagged? That's ridiculous. Must be a mistake. It's not, de Jong replied, her tone sharpening. There's an outstanding warrant for unpaid fines, traffic violations mostly, and a fraud investigation tied to your name. Care to explain? Marcus watched as Hoa's face drained of color, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. That's preposterous, she stammered. I'm a respected member of this community. He's the one you should be questioning. But the officers weren't buying it. Van Dyke stepped closer to her. We'll need you to come with us to clear this up, and move your vehicle, now. Hoa's hands trembled as she climbed back into the SUV, the engine roaring to life with a sputter. She reversed off the lawn, leaving deep tire marks in the grass, and parked sloppily along the curb. The officers escorted her to the cruiser, her protests growing louder but less coherent with every step. Marcus stood by his door, arms crossed, watching the scene unfold with a mix of disbelief and grim satisfaction. As the cruiser pulled away, de Jong lingered behind, approaching him. Sorry about this, Mr. Jackson, she said, glancing at his ID again. We have to respond to every call, but it's clear she was in the wrong. You all right? Marcus nodded, though his jaw was still tight. I'm fine. Just tired of this kind of thing. She gave him a knowing look, one that suggested she'd seen this play out before. If it's any consolation, she's got bigger problems now. That fraud case? It's not small. She won't be bothering you again anytime soon. He managed a faint smile. Good to know. De Jong tipped her cap and returned to her patrol car, leaving Marcus alone in the quiet street. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him, and leaned against it for a moment, letting the silence settle. But his mind wouldn't rest. Hoa's words, "He doesn't belong here," echoed in his head, a reminder of the invisible lines he crossed every day, even in a city as progressive as Amsterdam. The next morning, the neighborhood buzzed with whispers. Marcus heard them as he sipped his coffee on the porch. Hoa hadn't just been fined or investigated. She'd been living a lie. The SUV? Leased under a fake name. Her HOA position? Secured through forged documents and bribes. Neighbors who'd once nodded politely at her now avoided eye contact, their pristine suburban veneer shattered by the scandal. Marcus went about his day. Another round of meetings, another set of blueprints. But the weight of the previous night lingered. He'd won, in a way. Hoa's downfall was justice served, her racism exposed for what it was. Yet the victory felt hollow. He'd still had to prove himself, still had to stand in his own driveway and justify his existence to strangers. That evening, Marcus sat at his drafting table, sketching absent-mindedly, a habit that calmed him when words failed. The lines took shape. A community center, open and airy, a space where no one would feel out of place. He paused, staring at the design, and wondered if it was enough. Could he build a world where people like him weren't questioned? Where resilience wasn't a daily requirement? His phone buzzed. A text from a neighbor, Jan, a quiet older man who'd always been kind. "Heard about last night. Glad you're okay. Drinks tomorrow?" Marcus smiled, typing a quick "sure" in reply. Maybe not everyone saw him as an outsider. Maybe there were cracks in the walls, small but growing. Outside, the street was calm again, the tire marks on his lawn the only sign of the chaos. Hoa was gone, arrested, disgraced, her secrets spilling out like water from a broken dam. But Marcus knew this wasn't the end. There'd be others, other Hoas, other moments where he'd have to stand his ground. The question was, how long could he keep doing it without breaking? He set his pencil down, gazing out the window at the city lights flickering across the IJ River in the distance. Amsterdam was his home, flaws and all, and he'd keep carving out his place in it. One blueprint, one fight, one quiet triumph at a time. The future stretched ahead, uncertain but his own.